And this is a question that came in that really relates to that. So this person said, absolute simplest budget for somebody who struggles with numbers. I'm mid-30s and I've tried many times over the years to make a budget, but cannot get my head around it. Even when I try to keep it really simple, keeping receipts and writing down each transaction in a book, none of the numbers would tally with the transactions and the balance in my account. I can't work out how to budget for things that aren't the same cost each month, like utilities or groceries. I know how much my rent is, but everything else scrambles in my head and I can't make sense of it, even when I'm looking at it written down in front of me. Being able to plan ahead with money is incomprehensible. How can you work out how much money you will need for a given thing at a given point in the future? It seems impossible to me. It's so paralyzing to the point when my partner suggests small things like going for a drink, I'm convinced I can't afford it. It makes day-to-day living very stressful and I'm sick of it, but I can't see anything helping at this stage.
I think I see like the issue that this person's running into. It's dealing with those variable expenses, you know, and I think sometimes it's like, if you want to make a really neat budget in the sense that every single dollar is accounted for, those variable expenses are going to be a little bit difficult. What I always tell people though is, before you start budgeting, what I think is like a pre-budgeting step that everyone should take is go through a full month. And you can do this one of two ways. You can either print out last month's bank statement and go through it, or you can just start today and for the next full month, write down every single expense. Now you can actually have real numbers in front of you, because the problem is, if you go to make your first budget, you're going to have to take some wild guesses on some of these things, and you're probably going to be way off base, which isn't necessarily a bad thing on your first budget either way, but you're probably going to run into issues like, I didn't put enough money for groceries. I put way too much money for gas. I can't turn on the power anymore because I'm out of like electricity money. You know, like, you're going to have all these wild numbers over there. The nice thing about going through that is you know roughly what those cost, right? Like, I know for me, like, our water bill is like $70, $80, sometimes $90. So I always put $100 for it. I'm never going to go over that. And so if I have a little bit of money left over there, it's no worries. You know, at the end of the month, I could just figure out something. I think that you kind of want to look at those variable expenses and figure out, how can I make them inside of the budget as a fixed expense? In other words, what's the most I think I'll spend on those? And that can kind of be my limit.
Yeah, I think a lot of people struggle with that. But something I noticed from this situation, this person goes, even when I tried to keep it really simple, keeping receipts and writing down each transaction in a book, that's not simple at all. So it's not simple. So I think that's the first mistake. They're not really keeping it simple. And then I think the second thing is, they were talking about kind of comparing it to what they had in their bank account. And I always tell people, please don't look at your bank account for what you can and cannot spend. Like, yes, that's where your paychecks are coming into, but really you need to be looking at your budget. So like, stay out of obviously I want you to be looking at your bank account so you know when things are coming in, when they're going out. But I don't want you to look at that total and be like, wow, I have $1,000 in there. I can go spend $1,000. Because that's how people go broke. Honestly, I see that a lot of times. Yeah. They're like, wow, I have this, so I can spend it. And I'm like, did you look at what's coming out of your budget? Because, you know, is your, gas bill coming out of there? Did you already pay for groceries yet? Because those are the things that you need to take into account. So I think her probably, or whoever this is, probably staying out of the checking account to see where the money's going, and just actually living off of your budget would actually be a lot more helpful for this person. They're trying to keep receipts, write this in a book, look at the checking account. And it's like, just hold on a second. Like, when I'm budgeting, I rarely look at my bank account. I mean, I'll go through and just make sure there's nothing weird. But it's mostly just me living in the budget and just kind of putting things in there, making sure I'm spending where I'm, what I need to be, and not going over in certain categories. I think it'd be easier for you if you just stayed in the one area instead of doing all these different things, which I think a lot of people do what this person does.
Something that used to happen to me all the time and I still don't know why it happened. I've just given myself a little bit more grace on it now. Yeah. What would happen all the time is I would live in the budget, and then I'd go at the end of the month to pay off my credit card. And I was like, okay, cool. I should have this amount left over in my checking once the credit card's paid off at the end of the month. And sometimes it'd be off by a couple dollars. And that used to drive me crazy because like the numbers didn't balance out perfectly. Now, like, I'm sure a few times it was because I just typed in the number wrong on my budget or whatever. Mm-hmm. But you had mentioned like not living inside of the bank account and instead living inside of the budget. Yeah. I think there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. Like if you, because the issue that could happen, and you kind of alluded to this, is if you look in your bank account, you see you have $1,000, you spend it all, and then you forget that, the second half of the month, like your car payment is due, or some sort of bill is due, and now you don't have enough money in there. That can be the issue. I think if you are hesitant or resistant to using a budget, you feel like those overwhelm you, there's a way to set up your bank accounts to where you can do it that way. Number one is making sure you don't have more money in your bank account than you need to get through the month. And then number two is like kind of splitting up those funds. Sometimes in two separate bank accounts can be easier. One is to cover all the bills. You know that has the amount in there. You can kind of preload it with however much your regular typical bills are. You don't even have to look at that account. It's just on auto draft. And then the other is looking at your spending account and saying, cool, this is how much is left in here. These are for just the things like groceries, gas, dining out money, fun money, kind of those variable expenses. And then you can kind of look at it as, all right, I have $1,000 and this needs to last me through the month, but I know it's on stuff like I know my bills are already covered. That would be one way that someone I think could use the bank accounts as opposed to just keeping to a budget. But I always think it's easier to just write it all in a budget. Then you never even have to look at the bank account till the end of the month. Yeah,
for sure. Like I put mostly everything. I mean, anything I possibly can goes on my credit card. And then I'm just paying it off like maybe twice a month when I'm kind of reconciling or tracking my expenses or whatever. So it always, whatever I have in my bank account is really, I don't really pay attention to that because I know what I've budgeted out. It's on my credit card. I'm going to pay that off. So then it just sort of like cancels each other out. You know what I mean? I think way too many people just look at their bank account and think, oh, this is what I have to spend. And then that's where credit card debt comes in because then like, oh, I forgot about this. So I'm just going to put this on my credit card. And and when I get paid, I'll go ahead and pay off my credit card. And it's just a nasty, nasty cycle. I see it all the time. Yeah.
100%. That's exactly what I do. I more so look at my credit card and see, okay, is the number that, the balance on my credit card should be roughly similar to the balance inside of my budget, like on my spreadsheet. And then at the end of the month, I just pay it off. And I've never run into a situation where I owed more on my credit card than I had in my bank account because I'm using my budget.
Exactly.
My budget tells me how much money I have left over, not what's in my bank account. And then there's no second guessing, in my, for me, that's the reason why I love to be super particular and down into the weeds with it is because I don't like to second guess. I don't like to look back and be like, why did that, I didn't remember this or that or whatever. Like I like to just be like, cool. It's the little effort it takes for me to fill out my budget every single month for me is so worth the payoff of not having to even think about what's inside of my bank accounts. Only once a month when I go to pay off my credit card.
Yeah, for sure. And that's like one of the biggest things I really teach is like, we're looking at the budget. So if you do want to spend on your credit card, and I don't recommend that if you're in credit card debt or you can't pay it off every month, but people that are really good with their credit cards and they want to use that, they want to spend on that too, get the points or whatever. I do recommend that, comparing your, whatever you're putting on your credit card is fine. Some people freak out about that because they're like, well, I have $800 on here. I'm like, okay, but is it in your budget? Do you feel good about that? Can you pay it off? Yes, because you've already allocated this in your budget. So let's just stop focusing on how much is here or how much is in my bank account. Let's focus on the budget. Keep it simple if you need to. Oh, we've already mentioned that a million times. But I think that's what this person needs to do because their way of handling their money was definitely not simple, even though they thought it was. I think they could approach it in a different way and it would make so much more sense for them, even if they're not a numbers person. The information, opinions, and recommendations provided on this podcast are for entertainment purposes only and do not constitute professional financial advice. Any financial decisions you make based on the content of this podcast are your responsibility. We strongly recommend consulting with a licensed financial advisor or other qualified professional before making any significant financial decisions. By listening to this podcast, you acknowledge that we are not liable for any financial outcomes.